I thought where I'd go is to the rules of the road. And in essence, to my mind, there are 10, and consistent with the accountant's approach, I think that means I actually have 11. So here we go on the rules of the road. The first is, if you're going to do this kind of communication, do it before you need it, all right? Make sure you're communicating and building a good communication bridge with your shareholders before you're doing that just in order to secure some favorable vote. Secondly, shareholder communication is not a right for every shareholder. You need to be very selective about who you're talking to and in what circumstance. Pick and choose.
Wealth does have privileges.
Indeed. Indeed. Always start with management. I do think that it's important, unless your management is imperiled in some way, that it's better to have your management speaking first and that your participation in speaking with shareholders would be a secondary endeavor. Next, listen more than speak. There's no better solution to the perceived FD problem than for you to be a listener rather than a speaker. If you do speak, consistent with what Bonnie referenced, be sure that you are well briefed and well advised on what the current topics are likely to be and where you may speak and where you should refrain from speaking. Next, beware the casual pass. This is the cocktail party conversation where someone who happens to be a representative of your shareholder asks you a question, and that is perceived as sort of formal communication when you viewed it as cocktail party chatter. We are all very, very sensitive to not sharing material, non-public information. I'm speaking to a different issue. I'm speaking to the notion of a circumstance in which you will be perceived as speaking for the company, even on something that isn't necessarily non-public. And in those instances, you need to be very alert to those inquiries taking greater meaning. Next, and there may be controversy about this one, I would advise that when you do this kind of communication, never go there alone. Make sure that you have someone else with you who is a representative of the company, who is a listener, who can make sure that they assist you in staying between the lines and recounting afterwards what took place. Next, don't make promises or impose on yourself deadlines for response. I don't think that needs elaboration. Next, and this is one of my favorites, don't float ideas that are not yet fully formed. Many of our most successful large institutional investors have dozens and dozens of energetic analysts. If you float an idea that is in the early stages of being studied, they will take it to the bank, they'll study it, and they'll decide that that's a priority for you. So I would suggest that you stay away from early areas of inquiry on behalf of your company. And finally, actually next to final, don't get into a continuum of contact. If you have this meeting, have it, turn it into a degree of finality, but don't turn it into something where you're expecting to have an informal dialogue with your institutional shareholders every couple of weeks. That's distracting for them, it's distracting for you, and it deters from a company-centric message. And then finally, after you've had this kind of interaction, make sure that you debrief well with your company management.